On the second one, she was not. The first one, she missed, you missed the first special meeting. She missed the second.
Then
Are
she
we live?
didn't move to adopt the agenda. Somebody else did.
We're live, ladies. All right, good evening. We will start the meeting as we always do with our prayer for NCH City Council. God our Father, we are all your servants. We trust in your mercy and love. We trust also in your guidance. Direct the meetings of this council of North College Hill to make good decisions for all the people who live in our city. Give all the members of this council wisdom and insight to know what is best for our city. Help us to be fair and just in all our decisions. Bless us all to do the very best we can. With your help and guidance, we pray this in your name. Amen. We'll call this meeting to order. We will now do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 19th edition of the North College Hill City Council. Ms. DeWald, please call the roll.
Miss Blythe,
Here.
Miss Underwood,
Here.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Here.
Miss Zorb.
Here.
We know that Miss Hartman is absent. She's excused herself. And Miss Anderson.
Here.
Mr. President, we have 5 of the 6 members.
Thank you.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb,
I'd like to make a motion that we excuse Ms. Hartman.
thank you.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
Thank you. Motion for Ms. Zorb, second for Ms. Anderson to excuse Ms. Hartman from this evening's meeting. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Blythe,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
and Miss Anderson.
Yes.
Motion to excuse passes 5-0.
Thank you. You do have tonight's agenda.
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald.
after checking my mailbox earlier today, I had to add 2 items to the communications. One is the cities and villages for March and April, and the other one is a brochure for the Texas gas transmission. It's regarding pipeline safety.
Thank you. And also, I know we have the presentation for Mr. Dieters under old business, and unless anybody cares, he actually has a law director report. We all right to do it then?
Sure.
Okay.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the agenda as presented.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
Motion for Ms. Zorb, second for Ms. Anderson to adopt tonight's agenda. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Blythe,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
and Miss Anderson.
Yes.
Motion to adopt passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, you have council meeting minutes from 4-5, 4-8, and 4-10. 4-8 and 4-10 were special meetings.
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb.
one thing stood out to me, and I'll just say it. On the minutes for Saturday, April the 8th, it mentions that Miss Anderson was absent. I also was absent, so I don't know where this lies, but it says Miss Anderson was absent, but then under agenda, it says Miss Anderson moves to adopt the agenda. So I don't know if she was there or not, but one of
Miss-
those two are Wrong.
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
that is my error. Ms. Anderson was present at that meeting. Ms. Zorb was the only one who had asked to be excused. So I will make the amendment to make that as present.
Mr.
And then
President,
Ms. Anderson, and that's where I think that's where when I copied and, pasted these
Okay.
old products.
Ms. Anderson?
it should also say Thursday, April 8th,
Correct.
and then Saturday, April 10th. I think,
Oh, Lordy, thank you.
yeah, you're fine. That's all, sorry.
Thank you.
Mr. President, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the minutes with those two corrections.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion, please.
All right, motion on the floor from Ms. Zorb to adopt the minutes from 4:5, 4:8, and 4:10 with the two corrections discussed. A second by Ms. Anderson. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Ms. Blythe,
Yes.
Ms. Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Ms. Zorb,
Yes.
and Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. All right, communications.
So for communications this week, we have the cities and villages for March and April, which we get that quite often. Then the brochure for the Texas gas transmission, which is a pipeline safety. And then I just wanted to put a reminder out there for those council members, if they have not applied or have completed their Ohio ethics filing, there is a deadline on that. And where is that paper?
May
Well.
17th.
Got lost in the shuffle. Thank you. Yes. Oh, I found it now that you said that.
I guess I should have just been patient and
Well,
waited.
thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Any questions for the clerk? Thank you, Ms. DeWald. All right, that'll
welcome.
bring us up to council committees and starting off with budget and finance.
Yes. We met last Monday. We discussed a handful of things. It was my first meeting chairing, and no one picked on me, so that was good. But we discussed the tax budget a little bit, which will be coming up soon. We kind of went over February's monthly report. Ms. Hall led that, as well as the discussion on the tax budget, what our responsibilities were. Also, we discussed the upcoming need to work on the salary ordinance. We did not get in any substantive conversations about that to note. And when we do discuss it substantively, we'll probably utilize executive session as to maintain privacy for our evaluations of employees and things like that. Finally, Mr. Mosby brought up the issue of a little bit of I guess, I felt like we're over budget for the Sundale project. So that was discussed a little bit too, and briefly why that occurred, which is just it appears that some materials are a little bit more expensive right now than normal. Other than that, there were a few action plans that were listed. And our next meeting will be the second Monday of May. I don't have the calendar right in front of me. Does anybody know the date?
May the 10th.
Yes, May the 10th.
All right, May the 10th it is. So our next meeting will be May the 10th at 7:30 p.m. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Miller Novak. All right, next, city and community development and recreation.
Thank you, that's me. Our last meeting was April 12th at 6:30, and Ms. Underwood took wonderful minutes for me, so thank you for doing that. That's what I'm looking at now. I have looked over them before, by the way. I just want to say that I'm just going off of these. I started off by introducing kind of the direction I hope for the committee to move in and my hopes and dreams for that committee. We also spent a while discussing the recreation director position and what the current job description of that position is. There isn't really any current duties or current goals, as we don't have that position filled or financed at the moment. So we discussed kind of a plan of action for that. Then we moved on and had an update from Mr. Mosby about any recreation or development in the city. He reminded us of the cleanup day, the beautification efforts through the Unified Progress Committee and through the business associate, or is it business commission, business association?
Chamber of Commerce.
Chamber of Commerce, thank you. Chamber of Commerce, and how they are so nicely getting trash cans for us. We also got an update on Doomley Park, and that was about it. And we adjourned at 7:12 p.m. Our next meeting is the same night of May 10th, but ours is at 6:30.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, thank you.
Next up, public safety.
Mr. President, I
Ms.
just
Gould.
have one question for Ms. Anderson, if I could. She said the Unified Progress Committee and the Chamber of Commerce is getting, did you say cans?
Yeah, sorry, I kind of misspoke there. We talked about the Unified Progress Committee's beautification efforts, and then what I meant to say was, and also the Chamber of Commerce is getting trash cans. Those are two separate things. The Unified
Okay.
Progress Committee is not involved in the trash cans. They are
Okay.
involved in getting flower pots. Thanks for clarifying that. I realized I kind of
Well,
missed.
I thought I heard the word cans and I thought, well, cans could be 100 things. So, but thank you.
Trash cans, garbage cans of the sort.
Trash cans. Thank you.
Thank you for making me clarify that.
No, thank you.
All right, next up, public safety.
Thank you, Mr. President. We haven't met since our last council meeting. Our next meeting is next week on April 26th. And the public safety meeting is at 7:30.
Thank you, Ms. Underwood. And rules and public policy.
Thank you, Mr. President. Rules and Public Policy has not met since our last council meeting. Our next meeting is next week, April 26th at 6:30 p.m.
Thank
I
you,
would
Ms.
like
Underwood.
I would like to remind everyone that we do plan to discuss the council rules. And I know I said that I would get an email to everyone. I plan to get that to you later on this evening. But just if everyone could just take an opportunity to review the rules, because that's the only thing that we will be discussing in that meeting.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, next up, ad hoc reports. Do we have any ad hoc reports?
Mr. President.
Mr. Miller Novak.
Yeah, I could do one for the Unified Progress Committee. So we met we've been meeting on the second and fourth Saturdays is the plan, but this week we just are going to meet on the second Saturday of April. We're not meeting on the fourth one because we're gonna try to participate in the cleanup day as a committee. So that would be during our normal meeting time. What we've been working on, I believe Ms. Anderson touched on it a little bit. There's going to be some flower pots, and we're working with the Chamber of Commerce to get and investigate a selection of flower pots that will be across the strip, just to kind of add some visual appeal to the Galbraith area and the business. We're figuring out exactly who's going to pay for what, but essentially the businesses that want to participate in them will fund a large part of it, and they also will take care of their flower pots. So it's kind of like adopt a flower pot, I think, for lack of better description. The other thing that was worked on a little bit was the idea of getting the track open for public use, the school track. And I think Mr. Blaylock and the mayor have already kind of worked it out. I think I got an email that it's going to be open in the morning. That's the first goal. And then maybe later on, open it up in the evenings too for the residents to use. So those are two things that have moved along rather nicely. In addition to that, I didn't take very good notes because I don't take meeting minutes in that. But that's predominantly what was discussed. We're also kicking around the idea of doing a movie night at some point in time and locations where that could be held. And probably not this year. We kind of have kicked around the idea, but one of the thoughts we have is to do a block party on Galbraith. We know that we have the car show, which is really cool, but I know that I kind of tossed the idea. Not everybody's into cars, right? So maybe the idea of in the future, this year, we're still a little bit concerned about safety with COVID, but next year, we know we're bringing the car show back. So in the year 2022, the idea of potentially having a block party with food trucks and maybe some live entertainment or something like that in terms of music and kind of closing off Galbraith. So there's two events, one being the car show and another just being more of a get together block party with activities and music and food and things like that would be the goal. I think that's it. About as good as I got.
Thank you, Mr. Miller Novak. Any other ad hoc reports?
Mr. President, may I ask a question?
Yes, Ms. Orr, please.
Mr. Miller Novak, you mentioned that the flower pots were, I think I got the gist that it's business oriented. Is that available to residents at all to purchase?
Not right now. That's not being kicked around because the business association is going to throw some money into it. I mean, the issue is not just the purchasing, but also the care. So, I mean, that's the initial idea, is just have the flower pots in front of certain businesses that want to participate, and those businesses take care of watering the flowers. We're talking about alternating the plants that are actually in there to be seasonal, so they stay as colorful as long as humanly possible.
Any other questions?
Mr. President,
Ms. Nichols.
I did want to add, we did, just to piggyback off what Mr. Miller Novak said, we did at one point discuss that if a citizen wanted to adopt a pot, they could, but we didn't, as he said. So that's not an idea that if someone wanted to adopt one and we could find a location to put it and they were willing to plant it, nurture it, then I don't see where that's a problem. Again, we could go back to the committee and ask them, do they see if that's an issue? But I, for one, don't have a problem with if anyone wanted to adopt a pot.
Thank you. All right, any other ad hoc reports? I hear none, so we'll move on to the administrator reports and turn it over to the mayor, Tracy Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, Mr. Miller Novak touched on a couple things that I wanted to discuss. I wanted to talk about the Bruce Berenzi track. It is open Monday through Friday from 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. For any citizen that would like to utilize it. Again, it has to close as long as school is in because you can't be on a track when the kids are there. So that's, and it's still dark at 6, but the lights are on. So if anyone wants to utilize the football field, the track, you can now from 6 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. Again, we have the cleanup day coming up this Saturday. It will be muffins and t-shirts provided, garbage bags, gloves, and then you can go down to Kremer's for lunch afterwards. So that's this Saturday, April 24th, from 9 a.m. until 12 p.m. Registration will be here at the City Center. So if you want to come a little earlier, get a muffin, and then go out to whatever area you choose to go out and clean, we would greatly appreciate it. And the last thing, on last Thursday, the CIC met. And again, I know Miss Blythe wanted to come to a meeting, and we didn't see her at that one, but the next one is on May 20th. I would ask that anyone who would like to come to a meeting to sit in and listen to see what goes on within that meeting. Maybe you might want to join that committee. Please come out on that day. And if anyone knows anyone who is interested in the Planning Commission, we're looking for 2 people there. The person who I had in mind, unfortunately, has moved from the city, so we need 2 more spots. So if anyone knows anyone who would like to join the Planning Commission, please have them contact me. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Are there any questions for the mayor? All right, next up is the city administrator's report. Mr. Mosby, the floor is yours. Mr. Mosby?
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. President. Thank you. Just a few items. Number one, council had earlier moved to have the RFP done for the comprehensive plan, an RFP for the comprehensive plan. So I was able to come into contact with a student at NKU. And so as part of his capstone project, he is going to be, and he is currently working on our RFP for our comprehensive plan. So we're looking to have that, well, he's working on it now, and so he'll be working on it for his project. So I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he is going to produce for that. Last week, we actually had what I would consider to be a good week. We actually had at least 2 consecutive days where we've had users of the electric vehicle charging station. And I think that that's important because as the usage and the awareness increases, of course, the usage will as well. And as the usage increases, of course, then that is a source of revenue for us. So, clearly it's it's early, it's starting out small, but I did this just earlier today. I on my, actually it was on my LinkedIn page, but there was an article that was pointing out the growing usage of electric vehicles. And so with that, there's going to be, I believe that there will be increased usage, for our community. And I do believe that this is an opportunity for us to use that perhaps as a catalyst to begin to build out or build around that particular asset that we have. FYI, or just for every member of council's sake, we have also, or we're currently in agreement or working out an agreement right now for additional electric vehicle charging stations. They being the team that installed the first two, had already done created the infrastructure, for the additional ones, and a grant was provided to our partner, which is Electrata. So once our agreement is reviewed and approved by the law director, then we'll be looking at an additional 2 electric vehicle charging stations here as well. So I did want to make sure that council was aware of that. Of course, as Mr. Miller-Novak, I believe, was talking about earlier, and I do believe it is important. The Sundale project, as he had mentioned, I was letting council. I wanted to make sure the council was aware of that, because the overage in which we were talking about, and I was able to get some additional clarification on it. Part of it is the increase in supplies, and then there's another portion of it which has to do with the sewage discharge, that previously we were having the sewer lines running, in essence, more toward Clover Nook Country Club, and the way that they have it in the plans, it needs to run away from that. So basically it would be running not west but east, and so there is an additional portion in that. I do want to stress, however, that the overage that I'm talking about, of course, would be with the contingency. So that would be a worst case scenario. We will clearly, council has to pass the legislation anyway, and it's in, right now it is with the law director for review. So I do plan on having that by the next council meeting. So with that, Mr. President, I guess I don't want to go on too long, so I'll just conclude right there.
Thank you, Mr. Mosby. Any questions for the city administrator? All right, I hear none. Next up will be the law director report. Mr. Dieters.
Well, Mr. President, I have no report necessarily. I do have a PowerPoint presentation I think I sent to you a few weeks ago. So if you have the ability to pull that up on the screen, and then I can go through it. Obviously, I won't take the whole time to go. I'll hit the high points and then allow for some questions and just provide some themes to council related to it.
Oops. It is up on the screen, sir.
Okay. If you could go to the next slide. So what we're going to talk about, actually back, there we go. So just a little bit of agenda. The purpose of this really is, with the levy coming up and with potentially another one coming up in the future, there is always a question about what we're permitted to do or not permitted to do as it relates to the use of public funds and a levy. So we're going to talk about how the city funds can be used in a levy campaign, discuss a little bit about social media, discuss city employees and administrators, what they can do as a result of a levy, use of city facilities, and then I just have a few brief comments on 501c3 organizations and PACs towards the end. So political subdivisions, here's the statute. A political subdivision may use public funds to publish and distribute newsletters to provide information to their public, to communicate it with your public. So I always like to try, when I talk to clients about this issue when they're running a levy, I always talk about, let's not necessarily talk about all the things that are prohibited. Let's try to stay focused on what you're permitted to do. And basically you're permitted to use public funds in any capacity if you're providing information about the plans, policy, operations of the political subdivision, why the levy's on the ballot, what will happen with the funds. Those kind of things are all informational in nature. Next slide, please. You may publish and distribute or otherwise communicate. You're not permitted to otherwise publish, distribute, or communicate anything that supports or opposes the passage of a levy. So, and you can't compensate employees for time spent on any activity to influence the outcome. So you can provide information. You can talk to the public about why the levy's on the ballot. You can talk to the public about what would happen if the levy didn't pass. You can speak about what the money is going to be utilized for. You can provide all that information. You can provide information about the city's financing situation, how it would be impacted by either the passage or not passing the levy. But what you can't do is ask people for support. You can't ask them to vote yes. You can't ask them to vote no. You can remind them that their vote is in May or in November and remind them to vote, but you can't try to influence the outcome of their vote. Likewise, you can't, like I said, can't compensate employees for the time they spend. So what can you use those funds for? Prepare and distribute materials, newsletters, financial reports, distribute things about city's policies, actions, procedures. You can do things to advance public awareness of your city's programs, your safety and security programs, your mental health operations, your city operations. All of those kind of things can be issues that you can provide public awareness. You can use city funds for as it relates to the passage of a levy. Always comes down to what typically is the difference between information and support. And primarily it's that's really the sort of the primary limitation of what you have to deal with. So you're allowed to use those public funds to use, and public employees are allowed to provide information, use their time as a public employee to provide information, but they cannot expend public funds or use public employees to support or oppose. So sometimes that line gets blurred a little bit as it relates to what it is, but essentially if you're providing information, if you're telling people what the money's going to be used for, if you explain what would happen, what would the consequences would be if the levy's passed or consequences of the levy failure, any of those types of conversations you're having, any of that type of information that you publish or put out, at no time have I in any way asked for support for anybody to pass it. I've just been very informational, very objective in the information I'm providing. Again, this is kind of redundant, but if you're using social media, if we maybe on the city's website, you cannot post material that supports or opposes the passage of a levy or a bond, but it is permissible to advance public awareness, to distribute online reports and materials, and provide information on city operations and what will be provided or not be provided if the levy passes or fails. Employees sometimes comes down to an issue, and obviously you could not use city employees to support or oppose a levy, and you cannot compensate employees to distribute information while they're on the clock, but you can expend public funds to present information about city finances, which may include the discussion of the levy issue. You can assign one or more employees to duties of preparing city publications and materials. Sometimes in the past, where I've worked in places where you might have a fire levy or police levy, off-duty policemen, off-duty firemen, fire personnel, police personnel can go door to door and do things to support the levy. But again, they can't do it on company time or city time. I always try to make sure I emphasize, like I just indicated, that you must be on your own time if you're a city employee and you're working with a levy committee. Sometimes there's a difference between hourly employees and salaried employees, but the documentation is the same. If you're an hourly employee, we should make sure it's very clear and that you've kept documentation that demonstrate that if you're taking place in activities that would be considered to be supporting the passage of the levy, that it's on your own time, and it's outside your normal work hours. Now, it's a little more difficult for city employees who are salaried, and so what I tell clients in that capacity is that, salaried employees are basically, for lack of a better word, are required to put 40 hours a week in. Most of them put way more than that. So if you were, let's for instance, Ron was asked to go speak to a Kiwanis club or a chamber of commerce. And maybe he went at 11 o'clock in the morning. And during that time, he did engage in activities which would look like it was supporting the levy, and he was advocating for the passage of the levy. He would just need to make sure that he could show through his detailed log of work that he put in 40 hours a week. So from 11 to 12 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, he was engaging in activities that would be considered to be advocating for the passage of the levy. He'd want to be able to show that during the course of that work week, that the public still got their 40 hours a week of time by the city administrator. This can be important sometimes, in order to really touch base with those stakeholder groups that are important to get to support you in that process. Again, just a kind of a permissible and prohibited kind of thing, attending meetings, presenting information, answering questions. All of those things are things that are permissible. Supporting activities during regular work hours, like I said, keeping a schedule. Again, prohibited would be anything that advocates for or asks for support or asks for people to vote in any particular way to kind of influence the outcome. And some people will say, well, isn't it, providing information influencing the outcome? Well, it may be persuasive to the position, but it is just information and it's just objective, and people have to then decide for themselves because you're not asking them to support or asking them to vote yes. Permissible city computers, equipment, social media. Again, information's the key. Personal computers, email. Again, information's the key. Reminding people to vote. All that's fine. Prohibited would be using city computers and equipment to promote passage, using city email and accounts relating to passage, telling people how to vote. You can kind of see the theme here is information as opposed to advocacy. You cannot deny a committee access to city's facilities solely because it does not favor a city's position. So if you grant access to like pro-levy committees to use city facilities for meetings, you'd have to also grant that same access to anyone who might oppose the passage of the levy. So you can, like, for instance, sometimes this happens with school districts, like, the pro-levy committee might want to have a meeting in the school auditorium, and that's permitted as long as you allow opposing groups the same access to the equipment and facilities of the organization. Doesn't happen as much with cities as it does with school districts, but sometimes it does. Next slide, please. Signage, and I noticed that there's a space missing on the top of that slide, but you cannot adopt a rule that prohibits the posting of signs solely because such signs communicate a view not favored by the city. So it is permissible to adopt a rule to regulate the postage of sign concerning city levy. So I typically will tell my clients one way to stay out of trouble on this is to not allow any signs for advocating for the passage of the levy on your property. And therefore you don't also then have to allow any signs that would perhaps to be an opponent of the passage of the levy. Although it doesn't hurt, and you are permitted to, like on a marquee for the city, to say, don't forget to vote on the street levy next Tuesday or whatever. That's permitted because, again, all you're doing is asking people to vote. You're not trying to influence how they vote. Typically, if we were going to begin a campaign of getting information out to the public, I would probably work with Ron and Ari and make sure that anything we put out, we want to make sure that we've looked at it, we've screened it to ensure that the information is purely informational, that we are not using public funds in any way to advocate for the levy. And then just typically you ask yourself, when you look at this, would a reasonable person perceive the material as advocating for or against the issue on the ballot? And so this is where you have reminding people to vote. You might send home information, like if it was a school levy, you might send home with students. You could send it home with employees, donation sites for levy campaigns. You can tell people where those particular things are, registering voters, all those kind of things are fine applications of it. You just need to ensure that, like if you have employee poll workers, they're not on the clock when they're doing it, those kind of things. Tax exempt organizations and foundations are organized and operated for a number of specific purposes, sometimes in school levy issues, obviously PTOs or educational groups. I don't know necessarily, and Ron might be able to speak to this, if there's going to be any levy committee necessarily put in place for any of the levies we have potentially coming up. Typically for a street levy, a lot of times you won't have that, although I could see potentially if the city continues to move forward with a fire levy, that there may be some type of committee set up. And that committee really should become a 501c3 organization, and also register with the Board of Elections at the state level. So, but they may take positions on public policy issues because it would be a private organization. And we certainly have the ability to cooperate with those organizations that provide information. But again, we have to be very careful and very clear that if we're doing that, it's not on city time, or we're not doing anything which would give them a particular advantage over an opposition group, that we're not also giving that same courtesy and or same activity to the opposition group. Just a definition of a political action committee as it relates to a campaign committee. 501c entities may not make donations to PAC. Federal law would prohibit that, political interventions. 501c organizations may make donations to levy campaign committees, so long as the actions of the campaign are not attached to a candidate for a public office, or support of a political party. So if it's a levy, obviously it wouldn't be attached to that, and it permits for donations. Any questions? I also provided, Mike, I think you've had an opportunity to present. I think I had a memorandum too that went out to all council individuals. I don't know if everyone got a chance to see that as well.
There was the additional Word document on that email.
Okay. I don't know if there are any particular questions. It's kind of a down and dirty presentation, but mostly it just comes down to this. You have the ability on city time and with city funds and city resources to provide information to the public. And that information can sometimes look fairly persuasive as it relates to information. Like you'll see sometimes levies will say that if this levy doesn't pass, these kind of services to the community will be cut because funding would not be available, or these services would be impacted negatively because funding would not be available. That is not asking someone to pass the levy. That is just providing information as to what the consequences might be if the levy didn't pass. And so there can be a line that is important to recognize, but it also is important to get the information to the public, because if the council is asking the public to support a levy, it's important the public understand why and what that money is going to be used for, and why it is actually needed by the city. So you can do a lot. You just have to be careful about looking like you're advocating for the passage of it.
Any questions for Mr. Dieters?
Mr. President, I have one question.
Ms. Zorb.
Mr. Dieters, I guess I just want to be perfectly clear, because we as council members, we are elected, but we also get a very small paycheck from the city. So are as a council member, are we considered an employee?
You are when you're kind of on the clock, Mary Jo. So like while you were in a council meeting, you'd be prohibited from stating anything to the public about advocating for the passage of it. But when you're not at a public meeting and you're not providing services to the city in that capacity, you could do what you want when you want. So the only time you really would be prohibited would be at a meeting.
So like if I'm in Kroger and somebody asks me about it, I can tell them how I feel personally, not how I feel as a council member. Is that true?
You could even tell them how you feel as a council member, because you're not being paid at that moment when you're in Kroger.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Mr. President,
Ms. DeWald?
as the keeper of all paperwork, is this finally in a printable document that I can print and keep it attached with these minutes? Because when
Yeah,
that was sent to us in an email,
Mayor,
I
you should
couldn't
be
open it
You should be able to print it, no problem. Yeah.
from
I sent
where?
an email to Mr. Graver, so Mr. Graver could forward you the email that also had the memorandum
Perfect.
on it. Yeah.
All righty, thank you.
Any other questions?
Yeah, Mr. President, I did have one question for Mr. Dieters.
Go ahead, Mr. Mosby.
Yeah, when you were answering Ms. Zorb's question, I guess it just brought to mind, or I guess maybe some clarity that I need on my part. So if council is debating an issue, and particularly a levy issue, because I was actually going to ask this anyway, I think there is a difference between voting to put it on the ballot and then expressing either support for or against it. But are you saying that if they express support for or against any proposed levy while they are seated as council members, that is prohibited?
Well, it's kind of a fine line, Ron. If they were debating on the levy, or they were debating the merits of the levy, or they were debating whether levy should be on the ballot, that's all perfectly permissible, because that's, they have basically immunity as it relates to their legislative actions. So it would be more like after the levy was on the ballot, and that they used somehow their position as a council person while in a meeting, or utilizing some type of city equipment or something that looked like it was advocating for the passage of it. But the debate between council people regarding whether a levy would be needed, or what the money would be used for, or whether a levy should be put on the ballot or not on a ballot, that would be different, because I would have immunity because it's legislative deliberation.
Okay.
That's a good question, though. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to, because just because a council member votes to allow the populace to determine whether or not the levy should pass is no indication of whether or not they support it.
Correct. Right.
So
Yep.
They can clearly vote to put the levy on the ballot without any opinion one way or the other whether or not they support it.
Correct.
Okay.
Mr. President,
Mr. Miller Novak.
I thought legislative immunity, though. I mean, for me, doesn't that apply to like my own opinions? I mean, I know I can't election you, like say people need to vote for this, but legislative immunity, I mean, that protect me from saying I support it as an individual, as opposed to you must support it, or people really need to vote for this, or the public needs to vote for this, or the public should vote for it.
Mr. Miller Novak, yeah, I mean, it's a fine line. It really comes down to whether or not you're using the city's public funding in a way which would be asking the voters to pass a levy. So if in your debate about whether you're going to put it on the ballot, or if in the process while you're in a meeting and you're using a position like being on a feed like you are right now on Facebook or something, and you are advocating strongly for the passage of it, someone could perceive that you're using the city's funding in some capacity to advocate for it. but there would be nothing that would prevent you from standing outside the building after the council meeting and having a crowd around you and asking people to support the levy however you want it to do. But as it relates to your comments that you may or may not make in the capacity of a council person, there is some gray area admittedly there as it relates to that. Typically, I would advise clients to refrain from that because it's not necessarily necessary in that capacity to use your time on council or your comments you would make on council to advocate for the passage, because it just opens up the door for people to make arguments against it.
I think another question is, what are the consequences here? Is it invalidation? I mean, let's say that, I don't know, someone messes up. What are the consequences?
Well, the potential consequences could be, I mean, anywhere from a slapping of your hand through the election commission, or even to the potential that there would be a finding of recovery that city funds were used impermissibly. So city funds would have to be paid back somehow by the person who violated it. So if you and you'd have to determine who the party, that responsible party would be. The biggest, I think, consequences is just the negative publicity surrounding it, because typically in these kind of situations, what happens is someone files a complaint with the elections commission and it gets to be a big story. And then so the story gets to be the issue of the impermissible or illegal use of public funds to advocate for the passage of the levy. And opposition groups that like to engage in that kind of activity will typically try to file those kind of actions at a strategic time as the levy vote is approaching, to try to get people to look to that type of activity as being a negative consequence. And that's why you should vote against the levy to begin with. So you don't get necessarily thrown in jail, and typically you don't see a lot of findings of a recovery on these kind of situations. It's more the negative publicity related to the overall levy campaign in general. And I would say, I have to be honest with you, I don't, these kind of activities tend to be more related, and I don't know why, to school levies and other types of service levies. I don't see these types of activities as much as it relates to a street levy or a fire levy or a police safety levy. I don't know why you tend to see these activities more related to things like transit levies and school levies and park levies and those kind of things, more so than you'll see on municipal service type actions.
All right. I appreciate your time there, Mr. Dieters. Thank you for the presentation. All right. Next on the agenda is the Finance Director's report. Ms. Hall.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have anything at this time other than to just once again remind everyone that the income tax deadline is May 17th. That is approaching pretty quickly in the next couple weeks. And the Finance Department is accepting tax returns as a courtesy to North College Hill residents. If there is some sort of problem with being able to mail it on their own, we will accept those returns and mail them to Rita on their behalf. So that's all I have.
Thank you, Ms. Hall. Any questions for the Finance Director? That brings us to our call of members, and we will start with Ms. Blythe.
No comments at this time.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. President. I don't have anything at this time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miller Novak.
I have nothing.
Thank you. Ms. Zord.
We're on a roll. Nothing.
Thank you. And Ms. Anderson.
I am so sorry to break the streak, but you guys know how I like to talk. I just wanted to say that I'm very excited to see everybody at the pickup event on Saturday. Unfortunately, I'll have to leave a little bit early, but I'm still excited to go. But other than that, nothing. Thanks.
You know, I can mute you, right? I'm kidding. Thank, yeah, just a little. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. All right, next on the agenda is legislation. Ms. DeWald.
Okay, we have a second reading on Resolution 11, a resolution determining to proceed with the levying a replacement tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item on the agenda is comments from the audience. We have no attendees online and no one in this room. So that'll move us to old business. The first line item on the old business was the presentation from Mr. Dieters, which we included in his report. So next item on there is the 1579 Goodman Avenue liquor license background check.
So, Mr. President, I kind of put this on here as a placeholder for myself and Mr. Mosby. I spoke with Mr. Mosby today, and he and I are going to sit down and look this over and figure out I don't know if council needs to do anything about this. Is there a hearing involved? So if we don't discuss it tonight, I'll certainly discuss it with Mr. Mosby tomorrow.
Does anyone have any questions regarding this?
Mr. President?
Mr. Mosby?
Yes, thank you. I was going to say, I am going to sit with Mr. Wald tomorrow, but typically, or at least my experience has been that when these types of permit applications come through, unless there is some objection, to the establishment having a liquor permit, then basically it would just get forwarded back to the state without objection. And at this particular time, I know that the police department has already done their check on it. They found no reason for objection. So unless there is either objection from council or there is some kind of a specific objection from either the business community or, residents, then I would recommend that it just be forwarded to the state without objection.
Thank you, sir. All right, I hear no further discussion on this. So as far as other old business, we do still have council committee slots that need filled for OKI, CRA, and TIF.
Mr. President,
Ms. Underwood.
I don't know what the status is of us getting a new council member, but can we just kind of table the discussion until we maybe get a new council member to see if that person may want to be interested?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb.
if that is, I like that idea. If that is not an acceptable idea, then I would volunteer to be the CRA and TIF person in the interim until that person is here. I don't know if we even want to do like a temporary thing or not.
I am fine to do it either way. I mean, I am assuming that we should be close on getting a replacement council member. So I don't know that I want to get into saying we're going to do a temporary. So,
All right.
Yeah, if
Let it ride.
anyone wants to do it on the permanently, then that's okay.
Okay.
All right, we will table it.
Mr. President, while we're still on this topic,
Ms. DeWald.
according to my schedule from earlier this year, which didn't seem that long ago, really, I have the mayor appointment for the CIC as Miss Erica Underwood. And what is it that Miss Blythe was going to sit in on and couldn't make the meeting? Was that the CIC also?
Mr. President,
Yes.
yeah, the meeting that I was gonna go to, it got canceled. And then unfortunately, I didn't know about the meeting last week, so I'll have to definitely put the May 20th meeting on my calendar. Maybe I was emailed and I just didn't pick up on it, but I missed the last meeting somehow. I wasn't aware of it.
So my question is, I guess, to Madam Mayor, are there
There's
supposed to
two
be two
members.
appointments?
Yes,
I'm sorry.
yes.
Oh, so we've been short one all along?
No, Miss Bailey and Miss Underwood were on CIC. And when Miss
Okay.
Bailey turned her resignation, that left a spot open.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you, everyone. Any other old business?
Can't hear anything. I'm sorry. Did you say something else?
I'm asking for any other old business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, I hear none. We'll move to new business. First item on the agenda for new business is a motion to amend Resolution 2021-05, which is a resolution authorizing participation in the ODOT road salt contracts awarded in 2021 and declaring an emergency. And that was included in your packet from the clerk.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson?
so do you need somebody to second this motion?
I don't believe I have a, yeah, I think we need a motion and a second.
Oh. Okay.
The amendment to the resolution is the amount of salt at 250 tons, by the way.
Mr. President.
President. Oh, I guess Mr. Mosby's going to explain.
Right. This was discussed in, I believe it was Finance Committee meeting, and it was agreed upon that that a motion would be drafted, and then a member of council would move for the motion to be passed. And as Ms. Anderson said, it would be seconded. But you are correct. It is necessary for us to commit to the amount of salt that we are asking for, because we are required by the contract to purchase it at least 90% of the amount that we propose, and that is due to ODOT before the end of this month.
Mr. President,
Mr. Miller Novak.
I motion to adopt the amended ordinance, setting the salt at 250 tons.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
Motion by Mr. Miller Novak, second by Ms. Anderson to adopt this motion to amend Resolution 2021-05. Any discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Blythe,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes,
Mr. Miller Novak.
Yeah.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
Miss Anderson.
Yeah.
Mr. President, motion to amend Resolution 05-2021 passes 5-0.
Thank you, Ms. Dewald. Next item on new business is the Recreation Director.
Mr. President,
Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, that's me. Well, I'm not the recreation director, but that's
Congratulations.
asked to put that on there. So I wrote this motion out, so please forgive how robotic it's about to sound. Okay, I motioned that administration reevaluate the current job description, duties, and goals of the recreation director in order to begin the process of funding and filling the position. That's the end of the motion. But the reason I asked this, we had talked in the recreation committee, and we were discussing how important it is to kind of fill that position so that Mr. Mosby doesn't have to take on the role of that position any longer, and so that we can kind of move forward on projects that we wish to do. And our kind of first step in a long list of steps is to get an updated description of duties and goals, as there isn't really any right now.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion.
All right, and do we want her to repeat that motion, or do you want to take it off of the?
I will watch the movie and get it word for word.
Okay.
Thank you. And that was Miss Anderson motioned and Miss Underwood second.
Yes, ma'am. Any discussion? When you're ready, Ms. DeWald, please call the roll.
Miss Blythe,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak.
Yeah.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
Miss Anderson.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Thank you. Any other new business?
Mr. President,
Ms. Zorb.
I will take that pause as no more new business and make a recommendation that we adjourn.
Mr. President, I'll second that motion. If there was a motion. Sorry.
Wow.
I used
I'm
the wrong word.
sorry. I didn't mean to have it come off sassy. I just want it to be right in the books.
All right, so the motion from Ms. Zorb and the second from Ms. Anderson to adjourn tonight's meeting. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Miss Blythe,
Yes.
Miss Underwood,
Yes.
Mr. Miller Novak,
Yes.
Miss Zorb,
Yes.
and Miss Anderson.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn passes 5-0.
All right, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Miss Blythe and Miss Zorb.
Bye, guys. Have a good one.
See you later.